Powell confirms we are screwed. That's what I want to title this video. I'll probably tone it back and think of something else, but that's how I feel without including explicitives in my response to Jerome Powell watching the 60 Minutes interview where he reassures us that he's not political as we enter another election cycle, and he tries to land the plane here softly in regards to avoiding recession, bringing down inflation. And I'm going to play just the first opening line of this 60-minute segment. It's about a 13 minutes interview, and if you guys are into it, I would consider watching it. I'm going to give you the 5 bullet points that I gathered from it, give you my take, and if you want to watch the full thing, it's only 13 minutes long. It's not really that long, but listening to Jerome Powell and Fed speak can be rather boring, so I would understand if you don't want to. That's why I'm making a summary video right here. But just watch the opening line here as they roll in, and right off the bat, I'm going to tell you right now, they're parading Powell to cover up for just how bad this is. This is just like towards the end of 2019, right at the beginning of 2020, when he said nothing to worry about, everything's fine, and that was right before all hell broke loose. And we're not just talking about the flu season that came. We're talking about it really was about to break. The whole thing was already collapsing. Reverse repo was spiking, and the financial system was breaking on the back end. It just so happened that we got that event in March of 2020. The whole world went through the simulation event, and it allowed Powell to open up Pandora's box. This is what we're expecting to happen again this year. This is my analysis, and it just is so perfect. We take a break from the NFL playoffs, right? We're waiting for Super Bowl weekend, and what do we have? We have Powell on 60 Minutes doing the parade, and then we have the Grammys. So the masses have been primed. Watch this clip, folks. This is truly, this is telling right here. Listen in.
The chair of the Federal Reserve may have just rescued the economy from inflation without throwing millions out of work.
We are so done for, folks. This cheerleading, this celebration like we've already achieved victory. Even though in the interview they do come back later to admit that, yes, inflation has ticked back up at the last reading. And of course, now they're not even going to shoot to achieve the 2% target. He claims that never was really going to be the case, right? That's their long-term target, but they don't immediately need to hit it before they start to cut rates. So let me run down here. I got my little sticky notes so I don't forget my 5 key takeaways for you. First off, this is Powell's Victory Lap, which is completely setting up the masses to not see the financial tsunami that is coming, to not see that the banking crisis is not over. And this is the same as late 2019, early 2020. He came before Congress and said, yeah, we have an issue here. Obviously this flu season spread. This is not good, but everything remains strong. Everything remains resilient. We're watching it. We're fine. That was right before we got killed, right? Now, the next point that we have is that the March rate cut is unlikely. He says it's very unlikely that the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, who makes the decision here, is going to feel comfortable with a rate cut at that March meeting. Now, if they don't cut at March, that pushes us off until May. So basically, it is just us trying to survive between now and March. And if he doesn't give us a cut then we're carrying it out into May. And the markets are getting way ahead of themselves. Remember, these are the same markets, the same talking head pundits, and the same people that are begging Powell to cut rates now were the same ones that were predicting 6 rate cuts last year. And Powell gave us a big fat goose egg for rate cuts last year. Now, we are not going to be waiting until 2%, like I mentioned, but only 3 rate cuts are likely. Now, I think that folks are putting too much emphasis on how many rate cuts they're going to be. Typically, they come into cut during a moment of panic, crisis. It's already breaking. There's already blood in the streets. And so even with 1, 2 cuts, they can bring that Fed funds rate down 100 basis points or 1 percentage point, right? So they're at 5.25%, 5.5%. They could bring us down below 5% with just 1 rate cut. 1 50% cut brings us right back down below 5%. So I would look to see them cut, maybe just a few times, but look at how big those cuts are going to be. And of course, I'm of the opinion that these cuts are only going to come after the system has imploded, after the system is breaking once again. And speaking of it breaking, he insists that commercial real estate, yeah, it's an issue. Yeah, it's a problem. The big banks are managing it. But the little guys, the small regional banks, it's similar to what Janet Notel and Yellen said. If you're one of the small banks, we could care less. Now, Jerome Powell said it nicely. He said, we're working with them, i.e., we're determining which one of the big banks is going to buy you out. Is it going to be Jamie Dimon, right? And JP Morgan, which continues to see inflows of deposits as everyone exits the small banks and the regional banks that have been left out to dry, and they roll on into JP Morgan, right? Is it going to be JP Morgan? Is it going to be somebody else in the gang to buy out the small regional banks? We really don't care about them. That's no problem. That's contained. Yeah, some of them have exposure. And as we've been highlighting, the balance sheets on these banks are just terrible. $684 billion of unrealized losses on their bonds, and over $1.5 trillion of commercial real estate debt that has to be restructured in the next couple of years. You have exposure to over $2 trillion total, and a lot of that is negative equity. And so, yeah, the hilarious part about this whole thing is they play it off as if, yeah, everything's fine because Jamie Dimon and the gang is waiting to eat it all up. We're all waiting for the blood in the streets. Of course it's going to be fine. No problem. We're sipping champagne, and I'll see Jamie next time at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or maybe I'll see him at Davos. I'll see him at the next conference, right? No big deal. Little guys, yeah, well, they didn't really need to be around anyways. Those small regional banks that actually gave you good service, unlike the JPs and the Bank of America and these bigger guys that could care less, they charge you fees to have an account with them, literally. It's unbelievable what they can get away with. But when you're got the full backstop from the Fed and the FDIC and Janet Notel and Yellen, what do you got to lose, right? Who cares? Unsustainable fiscal path, selling out future generations. This is the final point, and this is why I say we're screwed. This is why I wanted to title the episode, Fed Chair Jerome Powell Confirms We're Screwed. Because he says we stay away from fiscal policy. Remember, the Fed is only supposed to be in charge of monetary policy. After the Great Depression, they were handed monetary policy, which was controlling money supply and setting interest rates. That's all they're supposed to be doing. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell, that's all he's willing to do. And he doesn't even want to comment really on the fiscal policy, which is how the money gets spent. This is where our federal government is now $34 trillion in debt, right? $34 trillion in debt. And then we have over $150 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Now, I believe that the number that they quoted was that we're on pace to hit $140 trillion for the national debt by, what was it? It wasn't 2030, maybe it was 2050, 2040. In the next couple decades, though, we're going from $34 trillion in debt to $140 or $150 trillion. Well, where are we going to go with our unfunded liabilities? That's what I have to ask too, right? If we're going from $34 trillion to over $100 trillion in federal debt, that doesn't include Social Security, Medicare, all the other programs. And as you guys are seeing, we're rolling out all sorts of programs now. They're considering a spending bill right now that sends tens of billions to Ukraine, tens of billions to Israel, tens of billions here, no money for East Palestine, Ohio, no money for Maui fire, no money for Americans really, only money for the military excursions. And as Jerome Powell states, though, he's willing to admit, he said the quiet part out loud, we are selling our future generations out. And that's why we're screwed. These guys want to debate, have we achieved a soft landing or not? Has he avoided recession or not? Ask that to the 22% of staff that have been laid off from Meta. Ask that to the tens of thousands of other employees that have been laid off from these big corporations. Ask them if we've avoided a recession. Ask them if we've achieved a soft landing. Ask the people, the business owners, the record amount of bankruptcy filings that we have now on pace with where we're at. Actually, we surpassed, I believe, the great financial crisis. Ask those business owners if we've achieved a soft landing and avoided a recession. This is why I'm calling it a soft recession and why we highlight the disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street. I put out a video a while back titled, Progress for Powell is Pain for Main Street. While they get a tout, lowest unemployment numbers, the best employment numbers, Well, it's the best employment numbers because we have an all-time high amount of people with 2 and 3 jobs just trying to make it. That's not a strong economy. That's survival mode, right? And so the disconnect continues to grow, and it's only going to get worse. That's the bad news for the masses that have been blinded, right? And this was so primed. If you go watch this, you'll see what I'm talking about. This was so primed to basically just let Americans know it's okay. The Fed has achieved a soft landing. We've avoided recession. Inflation's coming back down. And, Powell wasn't willing to say that prices on everything are going to come down, but prices on some things are going to come down. But if you look at the aggregate inflation from 2020 until now, you look at Truflation, they reported that the aggregate inflation's over 22% between 2020 and now. And although Truflation is reporting that inflation year over year is below 2%, if you look at that aggregate, it really highlights the point that, yeah, inflation's slowing, we still have some, but life is way more expensive than before 2020. And that's never going to change, okay? And if we are getting deflationary pressures, then that definitely means that we're in a recession. So pick your poison. And as we've highlighted in the past, and as we are predicting once again, I think we get a V-shaped recovery, a panic crash, black swan event comes through. Who knows what it's going to be? The good news is that you prepare the same way for the dozens of different black swan scenarios. We prepare the exact same way. We get utility with no counterparty risk, and so that's the beautiful thing is we don't have to, we don't have to be Nostradamus and predict which black swan event it's going to be. We just need to know that this isn't right. And the fact that they're parading Jerome Powell on 60 Minutes tells us that they know it's not good either, but they're, grandstanding him, dog and pony show. So please get prepared. Please understand what's at stake here for this election cycle 2024. They don't want to play politics, but no one's going to be paying attention that they got it wrong and that, that they're coming in and having to cut drastically when we're bleeding out in the streets, when the bomb has gone off. No one's going to be paying attention. And in fact, everyone's going to be cheerleading Powell for coming in, and they're going to be saying that he's not cutting enough. He's going to cut by 1%. He's going to bring it down below 5% back to that average of about 4.5, which would be pretty drastic. But by that time, Main Street will be bleeding out. And so it's up to us to survive, and it's us to save as many people as possible from the financial tsunami that's breaking right now. And we have a mass population that has no chance of making it through because they're busy watching mainstream, watching 60 Minutes thinking that everything's okay, watching Taylor Swift at the Grammys, whatever the heck they're doing. They have no chance. So this is why I encourage you guys to stay tapped in here. We're going to continue to break this situation down, not only on decoding the data, but how we prepare, how we run our businesses, the investments that we're making that carry us through. Probably another V-shaped recovery. They're going to kill us right before we rise back up, and this fits perfectly into our strategy for cryptocurrencies and for the other commodities. The beginning stages of a commodity supercycle, crypto commodities are included. Let me know down below in the comments how you guys are preparing. I'll see you in the next one. God bless. I am your host, Zach Rector. I really appreciate all of the love and support. If you want to support the channel, just remember that you can start by smashing that thumbs up for me, sharing this content far and wide, and everything else is at my website.